Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts. In today's video, we're going to be making this love potion bottle, which opens like so. You don't need any specialty dies to make this, but you will need something circular that you can draw around to get the curved shape of the top of the heart. The base element is 2 inches wide at the narrowest point and 4 inches wide across the top, and this base portion is 2.5 inches high. Once you see how the project comes together, you can obviously resize it to suit your particular needs. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to start by making a template for the front and back of the bottle. If you watch the process, and then you can change up the size of the bottle to suit whatever you need. I'm starting with a scrap piece of cardstock. This is 4 inches square, and I've folded it in half. So my fold is over to the right hand side, and make sure that you do burnish along the centre score line thoroughly. I'm going to take my ruler and mark at the 1 inch point on the bottom. Rotate the piece, and along the top and bottom edge make a pencil mark at 2.5 inches, 2.5 inches, and then join up that pencil line. You then want to bring in something circular. It doesn't have to be a circle die, but we're going to create the look of a heart without using a heart die. This circle die happens to be 2 1/8 of an inch from the outer edge to the outer edge. I'm going to sit the die in the cardstock so that the top of the outer edge is level or just under the top of the cardstock, and the left hand edge is level or just within the outer edge of the cardstock. And then I'm going to draw around the circle, continuing around until I reach the 1.5 inch pencil line. So this is going to be the top half of my heart. I'm then going to bring my ruler back in and extend the end of the circle, which is on the 1.5 inch line, down to the 1 inch mark at the bottom. Like so. So that is our half of our heart. I'm going to cut this out. So here is our template for our bottle. Now you might decide that you want a narrower base, so you could fold the piece back in half and then redraw from the 1.5 inch line down, perhaps so that it was only 1/2 inch away from the folded edge. Cut that out, and then that would give you a 1 inch base at the bottom. So you can change the look of this if you would prefer a different look. And of course, you can use a larger piece of cardstock as your starting cardstock. Just fold it in half and then adapt the sizes, use maybe a bigger circle on the top, and that will change up, obviously, the look of the front and back of your bottle. The next thing we want to do is make sure you've got a sharp pencil, and we're going to draw around this twice on our base cardstock. Cut those out. Of course, if you have any large heart-shaped dies or any heart-shaped nesting dies, you could follow the same sort of process and just straighten off the bottom across the bottom of the heart so that the heart can stand up. So you don't have to do it manually this way if you have heart dies. Then we want to get rid of any pencil lines that might have been left behind as we were cutting. And then do lay your hearts on top of each other just to make sure they are as near the same shape as they possibly can be, because obviously we're cutting manually, so sometimes we can go astray. And I'm just going to cut around to even out that part and flip it over, and I'm quite happy with how that comes together. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in my trimmer. I'm going to line the rounded edge of the heart up with the 1.5 inch line on my trimmer. So make sure the two topmost parts of the curve are lined up with 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to cut like so. So my front and back is now in 2 parts. And then I'm going to do the same. And then these should be the same size, which they are. If you would rather not put it straight in your trimmer, then what I would do is I would bring in my scoreboard. I'll use the template as an example. Line the curved edges up with the left-hand edge of the scoreboard, and then mark with my pencil or lightly score at 1.5 inches, and then use that as my guideline to cut the pieces into 2 parts. So that is the front and back sections of our bottle, and we're going to now work on the base section of the bottle. So we'll put those to one side, and what I'm going to do is measure the length of the side section, the base and the side section, and that will determine the length of my strip. And obviously yours may all be different, so just take the time to measure yours rather than going by my measurements. So my left hand side is just over 2 5/8 of an inch plus a 1/16. Then we should have a 2 inch base, which we have, and then we have another 2 5/8 and a 1/16 on this side. So my cardstock is going to be 7 3/8 of an inch, and then I need to determine the width of the piece that I want. So my potion bottle is going to be 1.5 inches wide, and then I need a left hand tab and a right hand glue tab. So for this base element, my cardstock is going to be 7 3/8 times 2.5 inches. So cut your cardstock to the width that you want for your box, plus a 1/2 inch, plus a 1/2 inch, and then whatever the measurement around the outside edges of the base are, cut your cardstock to that length. So I'm going to make a pencil mark at 2 5/8 plus a 1/16, which is here. Move the pencil mark along to a track and score. And then I'm going to rotate 180 degrees and do the same. 2 5/8 plus a 1/16. And then the section in the middle is 2 inches. On the short side, I'm going to score at 1/2 inch, rotate 180 degrees and score at 1/2 inch, and my internal section is 1.5 inches. We will fold and burnish. I'm going to cut up each of the vertical score lines up to the horizontal to separate the piece into 3 sections along the glue tab. This is a relatively simple process, and then take a wedge from each. Now we'll bring in our 2 pieces, and we're very simply going to adhere this onto the front like so, and then adhere the second section onto the back, and that's going to be the base portion of the potion bottle. That is the basis, or the bottom half of the potion bottle. Now, before we make the side pieces to join the lid, I'm going to make the stopper, because the placement of the stopper in the top will determine the length of cardstock that I need to go around these curved sections. You can change up the size and shape of the stopper to your preference. I'm starting with 2 pieces of cardstock which are 1.5 inches square, and along the bottom edge I'm going to mark at 1/2 inch and 1 inches, and then I'm going to draw from the top left hand corner down, and the right hand corner down, And that is going to be the shape of my stopper. So I'm going to cut that away. So this is the front and back of my stopper. I'm just going to lay them on top of one another and make sure that they are the same size, and then just trim this one down. See, something went awry there. So they are now both the same size. Once you've got the front and back elements and they're both the same size, you want to measure the left hand edge, the top and the right hand edge. And I need a piece which is 1 5/8 plus 1 1/2 plus 1 5/8. So my cardstock is 4 3/4 of an inch long, and it's the same depth as my bottle. So 1 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2, so 2 1/2 inches. So I'm going to score at 1/2 inch, rotate and score at 1/2 inch to create the glue tabs for the side panel. And I'm going to score at 1 5/8, rotate 180 degrees and score at 1 5/8. So the side section is going to cover the left, the right hand side and the top. So fold and burnish your piece along all of the score lines. Now, as I say, you might want to choose a different shape or different size for yours. So just start to put your stopper together. I'm going to separate the 1/2 inch sections to create the glue tabs, and then take a wedge from the ends of each of these. Now, in the top of my stopper, this is actually still drying, I want to have this heart slot down in the top. So it's the top part of the stopper. So what I'm going to do is, in the central section, is make a slot which is going to be in the middle. So I'm going to measure at 3/4 of an inch, and my slot needs to be about just over a 1/16 of an inch for my piece to fit in. Rotate, and I'm going to make that 1 inches long. So I'm going to make a pencil line from 1/4 of an inch across to 1 1/4 inches, and then just do the same on that pencil line. And then I'm going to cut that, so that's going to be the slot that I can get my heart in the top. So we'll now start to put our stopper together, and we're going to do it in exactly the same way as we added the base together. So this is going to run around the side, across the top, and then down this other side. Now I'm going to start at the top first because I want to get that lined up. It doesn't matter if your side cardstock doesn't come round right down to the bottom. If you've had to work in 1/16 or something, this bottom part is going to be down inside the lid, so you won't see right at the end. So don't worry about that too much. I'm going to use red liner tape because I'm using this silver cardstock. So I'm just going to run that all the way along. I'm not worried about what the inside of the stopper is going to look like from the inside. So I'll start to stick this one into place. So that's that side on, and then I'm going to stick on this side. So that is my stopper, and that is the same width as the base of the box. So my stopper is going to sit down in between, like so. So position your stopper how far down you want it to come inside the lid of the box. You can see here that we don't need to start the curve of the lid until this point here and this point here, which is why we're making the stopper now. So determine how far out you want your stopper to sit. So you might want it to be this far beyond, which means you would need a longer strip for this section here, or you might only want this element of stopper sitting down. Will depend on the look of your particular lid, as it were. So I'm going to have my stopper positioned about there. So I'm going to sit that on and then make a pencil mark where the stopper hits the top edge of this piece. So it will be there. I will do this side exactly the same as this side. My strip needs to be 2.5 inches wide and it's going to be this long. Now this is not going to be 100% accurate, but it will be as near as it can. So my piece was sat in the edge and then I've rolled it until my pencil mark has been in line with a track, and it's going to be about 2 5/8. Now I've got plenty of scope, so if it's slightly out, I will just have my stopper slightly in further into the top. So the length of cardstock from the right hand side to this point here was 2 5/8 of an inch. I've then added on an additional 1 inch, which I may cut away once the lid is prepared, but I was thinking that I may need that extra element so that the extra element could slot down inside the base of the box and would help to keep the lid closed. I can always cut that away after the lid's made if I need to. So my piece is 2.5 inches wide, scored at 1/2 inch, rotate and score at 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to score down to those score lines at 2 5/8 of an inch. Flip that over and do the same. Let's fold and burnish the score lines. I'm going to cut up the 1/2 inch score line up to the score line that we made in the 1/2 inch tab and cut that away. Do the same this side and then cut that away. Just add a curve into the piece beyond this tab that we've just cut, and then add a series of teeth into this side section because we're going to be adding the side piece onto a curved edge. So do that all the way along on both sides. So this is the side which is going to run around and down like so. And then we'll cut the left hand side. So I'm going to cut another piece which is 2.5 inches wide. I'm going to cut that 2 5/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to add on another 1/2 inch, which will create the hinge so that the box can be hinged and opened like so from the left hand side. So my piece is 2.5 inches wide, scored at 1/2 inch, rotate and score at 1/2 inch. And it's 3 1/8 of an inch long, and I'm going to score at 1/2 inch. Fold and burnish along the score lines. I'm going to remove the bottom left and right hand corners. Take a wedge from the end of this tab, which is our hinge. Add a slight curve into the remaining piece, because this will help us when we stick the piece into the lid. And then once again, add a series of teeth into the side 1/2 inch tabs. So let's start to put our piece together. We'll get rid of the pencil mark to start with. Now the easiest thing for me to adjust the placement of is going to be the stopper. So I'm going to add in the 2 side sections and then put the stopper into place and then put the back on. So choose whichever is your glue method. I'm going to add glue to the teeth and then start from the outer left hand edge and secure this side section into place, working towards the center. So take your time just to manipulate the piece around the shape. So that's the left hand side. I'm going to do the same with the right hand side, and I'm going to line where the start of the tooth is up with the outer edge on this right hand side. So I've got my 1 inch underneath, and you can see they look pretty even. So now what I'm going to do is, obviously I've used a shiny cardstock. I'm going to run some red liner tape down the front. I'm going to slide my stopper down until it reaches and can't go down any further because of the side cardstock. Try and get it in as straight as possible, and that is going to sit in place like that. So that is secured into the front, and the sides of the heart butt up against the side of the stopper. Now I'm going to take the second lid section and stick that over the top like so. So I'm going to add another piece of red liner tape onto the bottom here. Take the other part of the lid. I'm going to start from one end and work my way towards the middle. The lid obviously should be in pretty much the shape that you need it, but if you need to, you can just manipulate it from the inside. So that is the lid. So we now want to secure the lid into the base of the box. So I'm going to add glue to the hinge section, sit the hinge inside the box like so, and then just tilt the lid backwards to push the hinge into place. So you can see how that opens and closes. And this extra additional 1 inch is sliding down into there quite nicely, and that's holding that lid down into place. I might just trim that down just a smidge because it is rubbing slightly, so I'm just going to cut up like that. You might want to cut that down to 1/2 inch. It doesn't need to be that long, but that is proving a good sort of stopper and closure system. So there is our potion bottle, and that is now ready for the additional decoration and embellishments. Here's the finished bottle. The decoration is quite simple. So I had various size heart dies, which I cut out of the different paper you can see, created a chain of these as it were, which was wide enough to go over the width of where the lid joins the base. Added those onto some of the red cardstock and then just fussy cut around the outside, and then I've stuck the top portion onto the top half of the lid, and then on the base element I just have this simple sentiment, and then I've added my wooden heart into the slot which I made at the top. Overall, I'm really happy with how the box has come out, and I think if you do have different size circle dies or indeed something circular you can draw around, it would be really easy to resize this. So there we have today's project. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.